Welcome to my channel. Sit back and listen to the best true crime stories. Let's go. The story is set in 1985, when the first victims were discovered, but a couple of decades later, the same story dashingly twists its plot on the opposite side of the continent, under completely different circumstances and with completely different characters. The only connecting link in these events is a monster in human form, whose name, just until this year, was truly unknown. Although he has repeatedly served time in prison, I propose to plunge together into the maelstrom of those events. The Allenstown Horror, 1985. With your permission, I will start the story from 1985 in a place called Allenstown, New Hampshire, USA. It is a small country town in Merrimack County with a population of less than 5,000 people today, and even less in 1985. This town has never stood out in any special way. It's just an ordinary provincial town, of which there are thousands across the country. But definitely not a backwater, no. The standard of living here is quite satisfactory, and many other similar cities can even envy. Most of the residents are confidently occupy the middle class of wealth, live in good houses among decent neighbors, surrounded by beautiful nature. A significant part of the city is occupied by Bear Brook State Park, which is famous not only for its nature, but also for its recreational areas with amazing camping. As in most such places, people in Allenstown live a quiet and measured life. Finish high school, go on to college or find a job, get married, have children, educate them, send them to the big city in hopes of a better life for them, sit in a rocking chair on the veranda of their nice house and wait for their grown-up children from the big city to visit for Thanksgiving. This, of course, is very exaggerated. But in fact, Americans are very fond of a quiet life. They are confident in tomorrow and know what tomorrow will be like. Therefore, any event that breaks out of the usual way of life of the townspeople causes a kind of shock, especially if the event is terrible. Just such a shock happened to the locals on November 10, 1985. On this autumn November day, it was already cool, about 10 degrees Celsius. It was on this day that two brothers put on bright orange jackets, took their lunch with them, and went hunting in the forests adjacent to the reserve. In high spirits in anticipation of a glorious hunt, the young men parked their pickup truck and headed deep into the woods. As they made their way through the woods, they passed a foundation left over from the Bear Brook store near the main road. The plot of land on which the foundation stood belonged to a local man, Edward Gallagher, who in turn had inherited the whole thing from his mother. There was once a store here, designed for the park's vacationers, but unfortunately in 1983 the whole thing burned down, and by the time of our events only the foundation remained. But be that as it may, there were still travelers stopping at this site, such as in trailers or cars with travel trailers for overnight stays. By the way, Edward's late mother, while running the store before the 1983 fire, periodically complained to her son about the not-so-nice contingent of travelers stopping to shop in her store. While wandering through the woods with rifles drawn looking for deer, one of the brothers notices a large metal barrel among the trees. He approaches to examine the find, and to his horror discovers skeletonized human remains wrapped in plastic partially placed in and near the barrel. The hunters report their find to the police. Much later, one of the brothers who found the barrel will share in an interview that it took him a long time to get over the stress of the discovery. He could not go into the forest for 10 years after the incident. The small Allenstown Police Department, led by its chief, Norm Connor, assisted the state police who arrived at the site of the remains. In New Hampshire of those years, did not find a suitable laboratory for the study of found bodies on such a high-profile case. So, the remains were sent to Maine. The forensic experts of the neighboring state, examining the bodies, were able to determine that the barrel contained the bodies of two people. Body number 1. Gender was female, age 23 to 32, white, wavy, light brown hair, height 157 to 172 centimeters, weight unknown. Dental examination revealed that the woman had several fillings and 3 teeth had been lifetime extracted. The presumed cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The body was partially dismembered. There are no clothes. Presumably death occurred between 1978 and 1985. The degree of decomposition makes it impossible to extract more information. Fingerprinting is not possible. A DNA sample is available. Body number 2. Female sex, age 5 to 11 years, white, hair wavy, light brown or dark blonde, height 130 to 138 centimeters, weight approximately 29 to 38 kilograms, ears pierced. Examination of the teeth showed the absence of fillings, as well as the presence of a gap between the upper front teeth. Traces of pneumonia were found in the left lung. The presumed cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. The body is partially dismembered. There are no clothes. Presumably death occurred between 1978 and 1985. The degree of decomposition makes it impossible to extract more information. Fingerprinting is not possible. A DNA sample is available. Almost immediately, the first facial reconstructions of the victims were made. Police are distributing these portraits throughout the United States, as well as in parts of Canada, in hopes of identifying the next Jane Does. Also, through interviews with local residents, police learned that the first people to discover the bodies were local boys. They saw the barrels in the middle of the woods and started rolling them among the trees. They played until bags of bones fell out of the barrels. When they saw this, they hastened to hide and not to tell anyone about it. It was only a few days later that the hunters discovered the terrible find. Unfortunately, all efforts to find other witnesses or evidence were in vain. The victims were not identified. In this regard, it was decided to bury the remains. The woman and girl were buried in the parish cemetery. Allenstown Police Chief Norman Connor organized the funeral. The owner of Epsom Memorials provided the granite for the monument, on which he himself carved a rose and the image of the woman and girl walking away. Thus, the two unknown unnamed victims were buried together in a zinc coffin in the same grave. After many years, the locals still wondered. Who were these unfortunate people? Why is no one looking for them? Who killed them? But there were no answers. Not a single clue, not a single witness or new evidence. As the Americans say, cold case. Immediately after the burial of the remains, the leadership of the New Hampshire police decided not to stop investigating until all questions are answered. The instruction was given as follows. Work on current cases, and in between investigations continue to look for evidence and witnesses on the woman and the girl in the barrel. And this has yielded results. The Terror of Allenstown, 2000. Nearly 15 years later, on May 9, 2000, Police Sergeant John M. Cody was once again combing the woods near where the bodies in the barrel were found. He was following orders from his superiors to keep looking. And what he found shocked not only him, but the whole town. A horrible déjà vu. Again a barrel and again dead bodies. The second barrel was located some 100 to 150 meters from the place where the first barrel was found. The barrel was absolutely identical. After examining the remains, forensics have determined body number 3. Sex, female, age from 2 to 4 years, white, light brown hair, presumably wavy, length of about 13 centimeters, height from 99 to 115 centimeters, weight unknown, possibly anemia. Examination of the teeth revealed a malocclusion that was visible to others. The cause of death is unknown. The body has not been dismembered. Clothing is missing. The degree of decomposition makes it impossible to extract more information. Fingerprinting is not possible. A DNA sample is available. Body number 4. Sex is female, age 1 to 3 years, white, hair color light blonde to light brown, normal texture, wavy, length about 20 centimeters, height 64 to 76 centimeters, weight unknown. Examination of the teeth showed an irregular bite that was visible to others, as well as a gap between the upper front teeth. The cause of death is unknown. The body has not been dismembered. Clothing is missing. The degree of decomposition makes it impossible to extract more information. Fingerprinting is not possible. A DNA sample is available. Of course, these bodies were linked to the bodies found in 1985 and henceforth investigated as one case. Forensic experts found that the estimated time of death was the same for all the victims, meaning that the deaths occurred at the same time, between 1978 and 1985. New facial reconstructions of Jane Does were soon compiled. While forensic experts continued to work with the remains, investigators, awaiting results from their colleagues, began the investigation with renewed vigor. Orientations with alleged portraits of the victims were again sent out throughout the U.S. and again to Canada, focusing on the northeastern U.S. and Quebec. Local residents, trailer owners, and bikers traveling through Allenstown were again interviewed. Teachers in the surrounding area were interviewed in detail because the older girl had to go to elementary school, and what's more, she had piercings in her ears, which was very unusual for those years. Someone had to remember that a student had stopped going to school, but all this effort had no effect. A large family. A little later, new research results became known. DNA specialists came to the unequivocal conclusion that the woman, the oldest girl, and the youngest girl are related by blood. The forensic experts were more certain that the woman was the mother of these girls, but also did not rule out the possibility that she could have been their maternal aunt or older sister. A more in-depth examination of the victims' teeth revealed that the woman and the two girls were born and raised in the same region, the northeastern United States, and had most recently lived in New Hampshire and possibly even near Allenstown. These conclusions were based on comparisons of chemical elements in local water sources and the victim's teeth. The middle girl, on the other hand, was different. Research showed that she was not closely related to the others, but experts did not rule out that the middle girl could be, for example, a half-sister or paternal cousin to the other three victims. In the early 2000s, the main working theory of the police was domestic violence. Investigators believed that it was because of the desire to cover up the crime. The relative killer did not file a missing persons report. After all, it is hard to believe that the whole family disappeared, and no one for so many years did not take notice. Statistics also support this theory. About 30% of all murdered women in the U.S. are victims of domestic violence, killed by their husbands. On the other side of the river, the police continued to work hard, as the case became one of the largest in the country with unidentified bodies of members of the same family. But unfortunately, no new breakthroughs in the case were expected in the coming years. So, I suggest we move to the other side of the continent for a while, California. Perhaps at first you will find it difficult to find a connection with events 3,000 miles away from Allenstown, but be patient. Soon all the elements will combine into a very interesting story. So let's look at the events that took place in Scotts Valley, California, almost a year after the first barrel was discovered in Allenstown. In the mid-80s, Scotts Valley is a small but not poor town in Santa Cruz County, a 12-square-mile town experiencing dramatic population growth. I suggest we not delve into the geographical features, but go straight to the local trailer park in the hot summer of 1986. An elderly woman named Catherine Decker, who lived temporarily in this park with her husband and grandson, was looking after a neighbor, a blonde girl named Lisa, about 5 years old. To the little girl she had very tender feelings, considering her almost a granddaughter, and Lisa, in turn, very attached to Catherine, and after a while called her grandmother. The girl's father, Gordon Jensen, who worked in the park as an electrician, was also very kind to Catherine, no doubt trusted her with his daughter, and was very grateful for her help. Gordon told Catherine that Lisa's mom had been killed in a traffic accident, and he was still having an extremely difficult time coming to terms with that loss. In general, the neighbors have developed quite a warm relationship, and that's why Catherine, shortly before moving out of the trailer park, shared with Gordon the misfortune that befell her daughter's family. They could not have children. In response, Gordon, unexpectedly for Catherine, offered her to take Lisa into their family, say, "He is very difficult to raise a girl alone, and he will be very happy if his daughter will be in a full-fledged loving family, because he wishes his daughter a better life." Catherine, not believing her happiness, called her daughter and told her everything. Weighing all the pros and cons, Catherine's family decided to take the girl for themselves. Gordon proposed to first take Lisa in the family for a while, literally for 2 weeks, to make sure that the girl will be good with new parents. And after this period, if all is satisfied, then leave Lisa forever. On that, and agreed. The girl moved temporarily to the house of her daughter Catherine. The future adoptive mother decided not to delay with the registration of custody and turned to his lawyer to settle all the formalities. The lawyer said he needed the girl's birth certificate and her mother's death certificate to start the guardianship proceedings. The happy mom-to-be drove back to Gordon's trailer park to get the documents. But to her surprise, Gordon was no longer at the park. Catherine's family decided to try to find out from Lisa where her daddy might be. And Lisa started talking. She went into such detail, from which the future parents were stunned. The girl was repeatedly abused by her father. Catherine's family went to the police that same day. Social services, as they should, placed the girl in the care of the state. And sadly, Catherine's family never saw Lisa again. Meanwhile, the police began interviewing Lisa, trying to find any clues that might help them in their search for the rapist. They asked the girl if she has any brothers or sisters. The girl, without a shadow of a doubt, says that, yes, there were, but they all died of mushroom poisoning on a camping trip. The case begins to gather momentum. Investigators go to the trailer park looking for clues. They find a fingerprint that is supposed to belong to Gordon. After checking, it turns out that the print belongs to a completely different man, Curtis Mayo Kimball, who about a year ago was pulled over by patrol officers for drunk driving with his young daughter in the passenger seat. Investigators conclude that there is no Gordon, which in turn indicates that they are only seeing the tip of the iceberg and need to dig deeper. In 1988, police officers stop a suspicious car in San Luis Obispo County, California. Upon inspection, it turns out that the car is listed as stolen in Idaho. The driver is apprehended and taken to the station for questioning and a more thorough identity check. As you may have guessed, the driver was Lisa's father, Gordon. Investigators charged him with abandoning his daughter, but not with rape. This decision was made by the prosecutor in order to shield the girl from the nightmare. The defense did not want Lisa to testify. Gordon pleads guilty and goes to jail for 19 months. He is released early in 1990, and after violating his parole, he flees the city. Yoon-sung June Gordon settles in Richmond, California, takes a new name, Larry Warner, and lives there quietly for the next 10 years. The man is not afraid of work. He takes up any offer, whether it is small repairs or household help. Shortly after moving to Richmond, he takes up residence in a room he renovated at the store. The owners of the building, as well as all around, do not see Gordon as a monster. The only thing that neighbors and his acquaintances noted is a heavy alcohol addiction. Slowly, Gordon's life gets better. He meets a 40-year-old woman named Eun-soon Jun. They date for a couple of years, and in 2001 they even celebrate their marriage in the backyard of Yoon-soon's house. Gordon soon moves in to live with her. How their family life was formed is not known, since relatives and friends were not willing to share information with the press. But be that as it may, about a year after the wedding, in May 2002, a friend Yoon-sun sounded the alarm. The woman is missing. The case falls on the desk of Roxanne Gruenheid, a very experienced Contra Costa County homicide detective. I'm specifically emphasizing Detective Gruenheid's experience because taking the Yoon-sun case was the first time she couldn't find a single lead. She spoke to the missing woman's husband, Gordon, who was completely calm and unperturbed. He claimed that his wife was in Oregon in a clinic and even gave the contacts of her doctor. The only thing that confused the detective was that he spoke of his wife in the past tense. That same day, the detective suggested that Gordon volunteer to be fingerprinted, and he agreed without hesitation. Gordon's in interrogation. It is not known what Gordon was hoping for, but the detectives soon learned that the man sitting in front of them was not Larry, but Curtis Mayo Kimball, who had been prosecuted for abandoning the girl Lisa, and who was wanted for parole violations in 1990. The police arrest Gordon and go to search Yoon-sung's home. There are still pictures of Yoon-sung hanging on the refrigerator, but the women's belongings are no longer in the house. On the fence in the backyard, the police find a dead, mummified kitten, but there's no trace of Yoon-sung. After finding no evidence in the house, the police went down to the basement, and that's where it became clear that there was no need to look for Yoon-sung anymore. Her dismembered and mummified body was found under a huge pile of cat feces. A saw and an axe were lying next to the body. The coroner would later determine that death had occurred several months after the wedding due to blunt force trauma to the head. Detective Gruenheid, having familiarized himself with all the details of this murder, comes to a definite conclusion. This is not the first murder of Gordon. It seems that it is this assumption of the experienced detective predetermined the case of a lifetime. Gruenheid. She decided to solve it, no matter what it cost her. Gruenheid requests all available documents on Lisa's case. She spends 24 hours studying the available testimony of the girl and everyone who knew Gordon in 1986. But the more the detective learns, the more questions she has. Her main concern is Lisa's mother. According to witness testimony, Gordon told the story of her death in different ways. Some about the terrible accident that killed his beloved wife and Lisa's mother, some about the terrible agony in the last days of his wife's life because of cancer, some about the tragic death of Lisa's mother in a shootout. So how did Lisa's mother die? There were no documents testifying to the woman's death in the case file, nor were there any documents for the girl. But there was a report about taking blood from Gordon for paternity testing, but there was no information about the test and its results. It turns out that no one had ever done the test. This made Grunheide very angry. She rushed to initiate a paternity test. While this procedure went through all the bureaucratic steps, Gordon's trial took place. The defendant immediately confessed in the courtroom to the second-degree murder of his wife, Yun-sun. The court sentenced him to 15 years in prison. Immediately after the court hearing ended, Grunheide received the results of the DNA test. Gordon is not Lisa's father and has no blood connection to the girl. With the test results in hand, the detective sends them to the police department in Santa Cruz County that handled the abandoned Lisa's case. Based on these results, the case is reevaluated and reclassified as a kidnapping case. All attempts by investigators to get any answers from Gordon are fruitless. Gordon states during interrogations that he does not remember any girl Lisa. In 2010, Gordon dies in prison without giving investigators a single clue about Lisa or his real name. Project Lisa. Lisa was adopted. No, not Catherine's family. The whole procedure was formalized according to the letter of the law. The state saw to it that the girl, who had suffered a lot in her short life, got to loving parents. The exact information about the following years of Lisa's life in the public domain is not available, but it is known that Lisa grew up near Los Angeles, married, and gave birth to 3 children. The girl is said to be happy, especially now that she's finally being told who she really is. In 2015, Lisa, still tormented by the question, "Who am I?" decided to start searching for her real parents. She turned to Ancestry.com, an organization specializing in human DNA testing and finding relatives. For the record, this service is quite common in the U.S. Personally, I have not encountered private search for people through DNA, but I know people who applied to these organizations to find out what blood flows in their veins. You order the service, pay about $100, the company sends a cotton swab to your house. You soak it in your saliva and send it back. After some time you get the result. For example, in your ancestry there were whites, Chinese, Jews, and some Yakuts. This is exaggerated. Even though Lisa was already established in her life, it was still very important for her to find out who she was and where she came from. The police, in the person of a deputy sheriff of San Bernardino County, who investigated her case in 1986, also decided to help in this matter, because they met quite a rare phenomenon in their practice, a living Jane Doe. In parallel, the detectives sent an informal request to another organization similar to that requested by Lisa herself, but used samples taken back in '86. At the request of the police, the investigation of Lisa's origin was undertaken by specialist Barbara Ravener. Having studied the history of the kidnapped girl, she could not leave the police request unanswered. To search for Lisa's relatives through DNA databases, a whole team of volunteers was assembled, and the search itself was called Project Lisa. While specialists were working on finding the relatives of the girl, a response came from where Lisa applied in 2015. They managed to find out something interesting. In their databases, there is an 81-year-old man who lived on the east coast of the U.S., and his family roots came from Canada. This man went ahead and gave additional information about his family. It turned out that Lisa was related to him through a common female ancestor. But the available information was not enough. We needed data on more relatives. Then Lisa turned to other genealogical organizations. One of them gave more information. A certain Adam Kime, 42 years old from San Francisco, is related to Lisa. Barbara Ravener, who was involved with the Lisa Project, contacted him and asked for his help in identifying Lisa, but unfortunately Adam was unable to help, as he knew nothing about his family. He himself had been adopted in early childhood and had already given up any attempts to find his family. Barbara, after listening to his story, promised to help him in his search if he would provide DNA samples for testing and information about his adoption, namely his mother's maiden name. Adam, having no particular hopes and illusions about finding his family, still decided to help Lisa because he understood more than anyone else her desire to find herself. In addition, on the basis of the data provided by Adam, the police were able to obtain a warrant to disclose information about the biological parents of the guy. After researching all the information about Adam, Barbara found out his real name given at birth, found his brother, and found his mother, who, as it turned out, lived a few hours away from his home. Thanks to the information provided by Adam, there was a breakthrough in Lisa's case. It turned out that Adam and Lisa both have a connection to an 81-year-old man from the east coast of the United States, and this connection comes through a common female ancestor, the grandmother of this man. And this is where the experts faced a new challenge. This 81-year-old man's grandmother had 18 children, which meant that they would need to test them all. Long days of studying all sorts of archives to find information about all of Lisa's relatives began. Not only U.S. documents were studied, but also Canadian ones. In the end, the experts found 19,000 of Lisa's relatives on her mother's side. 19,000 people. Then the hardest part began. Volunteers called everyone on the list. Of course, the vast majority of people refused either to assist in providing data about themselves or even to talk at all. But the meticulous and painstaking work of Project Lisa workers bore fruit. It turned out that Lisa comes from a line of French Canadians who settled in New Hampshire. One of the specialists involved in the search for Lisa's roots, in one archive, found information about one relative, Georgette Bowden, who passed away in 2008. It turned out that Georgette had a daughter, Denise Bowden, but no data on this daughter could not be found. Then, by the method of elimination, specialists marked all possible mothers of Lisa, and the only one who was suitable for this role was Denise, the disappeared girl. Denise Bowden. Denise was born on January 7, 1958. Extensive information about Denise I have not found. It is known that in 1976 the girl graduated from Goffstown, New Hampshire High School, then moved from place to place several times, and finally settled in Manchester, New Hampshire. She worked at General Cable at 345 McGregor Street and at Demers Nursing Home at 191 Hackett Hill Road. I would also like to point out here that the girl had an improper bite, which is noticeable in the photo. According to Denise's parents, she was last seen at her parents' home in Goffstown, New Hampshire, on Thanksgiving Day in 1981 when she came to visit with her 6-month-old daughter Dawn Bowden and new boyfriend Robert, Bob Evans. Just under a week later, Denise's parents went to her home to check on their daughter and granddaughter. I do not know for certain whether the visit was prompted by good family tradition or by the parents' concern for the girl's fate. But whatever the case, the parents, who arrived in Manchester, found neither their daughter, nor their granddaughter, nor Bob, and looking ahead, I will say, they never saw their daughter again. Lisa found out who she was, Dawn Bowden, Denise's daughter. She was told this by a police officer who had been supporting her all along and promised to find her roots. Lisa is said to have listened silently to the information about herself and hung up the phone. She later called back and started asking hundreds of questions. I guess the question you're wondering is, why didn't Denise's parents report her missing? We know from unofficial sources that the parents thought their daughter and her granddaughter and boyfriend had simply run away. It is said that Bob had prepared the ground for her disappearance in advance. Namely, he told her parents about Denise's many financial problems and that they were looking for ways to cope with them. In addition, Bob made a pleasant impression. All in all, the parents did not report their daughter and granddaughter missing in 1981, believing that they had simply run away and cut off all loose ends. Interestingly, it wasn't until December 28, 2016 that Denise was officially reported missing. On January 17, 2017, police searched Denise's home in Manchester, a breakthrough in the Barrel Girls investigation. When the San Bernardino County Sheriff's deputy who had helped Lisa find information about her family all those years ago became aware of who Lisa really was, he contacted Ashley Rodriguez, a forensic investigator at the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. He informed her that Lisa's mother was Denise Bowden, who had disappeared in Manchester in 1981. Ashley opened the map and a thought flashed through her mind. A woman and a baby had disappeared in the same area, where in 1985 and 2000 were made terrible finds the bodies of girls and a woman in barrels. And it was Ashley who asked the police to take notice. Police launched an investigation. Investigators found that a man who called himself Robert Bob Evans worked as an electrician at Wombeck Mills in Manchester from 1977 to 1981, and that his boss, Edward Gallagher, was the owner of the land where the bodies were found. Evans also did electrical work in Edward's store and used the land to dispose of the material. Also, by checking photos, it was determined that Robert Bob Evans, who had been cited multiple times for unauthorized tapping into other people's electrical lines, was not Robert Evans at all, but Gordon Jensen, who abandoned Lisa in a trailer park in California. In addition, additional DNA testing reveals that Denise Bowden is not the woman found in the barrel, and that the middle girl, body number 3, is Gordon Jensen's daughter. It is after this that Gordon becomes suspect number 1 in the Barrel Girls case. Investigators speculate that Denise Bowden also fell victim to Gordon. Police believe Gordon traveled the country looking for single mothers with children, suggesting that there are likely many more victims. Police are unequivocal. Gordon's profile fits that of a serial killer. The biological mother of Gordon's daughter has never been found. There is information obtained from Gordon during his arrest in Manchester in 1980 for stealing electricity that he was married to one Elizabeth. But in 1981, Gordon was already living with Denise Bowden, Lisa's mother. Gordon was a chameleon. Sometimes clean-shaven, sometimes disheveled and with a scruffy beard. Then he spoke with a southern accent, then an East Coast accent, or no accent at all. Several women recalled his bright blue eyes and described him as a charming man. Men, on the other hand, described him as withdrawn and unsociable. He was intelligent, fluent in French and, according to one witness interviewed by police, also spoke Spanish, Chinese, and Arabic. Let's try to trace his biography based on the facts established by the police, as well as witness statements published online. I will immediately disclaim that the information is not exact, somewhere, perhaps, approximate. 1943. Supposedly Gordon was born on December 23 in Colorado and was the youngest son in the family. 1954 to 1958. Attends Whittier High School in Phoenix, Arizona. 1958 to 1961. Moved with his family to Phoenix. Frequently ran away from home as a teenager. 1959 to 1960. Attends high school in Phoenix. Does not graduate from high school. 1961. Goes into the Army, specifically the U.S. Navy, served as an electrician in a construction unit. Serves in Japan. 1967. Discharged from the Navy. 1967 to 1968. After discharge from the Navy, moves to Hawaii, where he works in his parents' shoe shop. 1968. Marries in Hawaii. He says his wife's name was Denise Laporte and they met in Quebec, Canada, but were never able to identify her. 1969. Moves to Phoenix, where he gives birth to twin girls. Works as an electrician for the auto company. 1970. Gordon and his family moved to Redwood City, California, where he continues to work as an electrician already in Palo Alto. Here his son is born. 1972. A fourth child, a daughter, is born. In October 72, temporarily separated from his wife. 1973. Gordon and his family return to Phoenix. He again works at autos and works part-time at a shoe repair shop. 1973. Arrested by the Sheriff's Office of Maricopa County, Arizona. 1975. Gordon is arrested again in Phoenix for aggravated assault. It is believed to be after this arrest that his wife and children leave him and move to Payson, Arizona. 1975 or 1976. Gordon pays an unexpected visit to his family in Payson. An unknown woman is with him. He tells his family that he lives at Casa del Rey in Ingleside, Texas. Gordon's family sees him for the last time. 1978. Works at Brown and Root in Houston. 1978. Contacts a friend in Arizona and asks for money. Says he is working on an oil rig in Texas. 1978. Divorce is finalized. Gordon's whereabouts are unknown. 1978 to 1979. Works in a factory at Wombeck Mills in Manchester as a master electrician under the name Robert Evans. This is where he had access to the barrels, according to police information. Also reportedly doing repairs at the Bear Brook store, near the foundation of which the barrels were found. 1980. Gordon is arrested in Manchester for stealing electricity. At the station, he says he is married to Elizabeth Evans. 1981. Denise Bowden goes missing with her 6-month-old daughter and her boyfriend Robert T. Evans. 1984 to 1985. Gordon takes a job with a company in Los Alamitos, California under the name Curtis Kimball. 1985. Gordon is arrested in Cypress, California for DUI while Lisa was in the car with him. 1985. The first barrel in Allenstown is found with the bodies of a woman and a girl. 1986. Gordon resides with Lisa in a trailer park in Scotts Valley, California under the name Gordon Jensen. 1986. Leaves Lisa to Grandma Catherine and flees to an unknown destination. 1986. Police check the fingerprints of Gordon Jensen and Curtis Mayo Kimball, confirming that they belong to the same person. 1988. Gordon is apprehended in San Luis Obispo for driving a stolen vehicle out of Preston, Idaho. Gordon introduces himself as Gerry Mockerman. 1989. Gordon is arrested for abandoning Lisa and sentenced to 3 years in prison. 1990. Released after 19 months. Violating parole conditions, Gordon leaves town immediately upon release. 1998. Stopped in California under the name Lawrence William Warner. He is detained for having no insurance and no driver's license. 2000. A second barrel is found in Allenstown with the bodies of 2 unidentified girls. 2002. Yoon Jun disappears in Richmond, California. 2002. Gordon is arrested for Yoon Sung's murder and for parole violation. 2003. Convicted of Yoon Sung's murder and sentenced to 15 years in prison. 2003. DNA testing confirms that Gordon is not the biological father of Lisa.
2010. Gordon dies in prison.
2016. Further DNA testing confirms Gordon is the biological father of an unidentified girl whose remains were found in Allenstown in 2000. 2017. Authorities formally announce his connection to the Allenstown murders and the disappearance of Denise Bowden. 2017. Authorities complete DNA testing confirming that the man known as Curtis Kimball, Gerry Gorman, Gerald Mockerman, Gordon Jensen, and Lawrence Warner is actually Terry Peder Rasmussen. Investigators were able to conclusively establish this with the help of one of Gordon's 4 children, who agreed to provide his biological material to help the investigation. By the way, his children knew nothing about their father's fate until police contacted them. They hardly remembered him, and the news that their father was a murderer shocked them. New details in the Barrel Girls case. In 2017, police present updated reconstructions of the bodies of the dead girls and woman. The time of death for all 4 is narrowed down to between 1980 and 1984. Also, experts analyzed isotopes in the bones, hair, and teeth of the victims found in barrels at Bear Brook State Park and determined that the woman, the oldest child and the youngest child, probably lived in an area close to the Atlantic coast, stretching from Pennsylvania to Maine, or in other states according to the map below. The middle child probably spent her childhood farther inland, most likely farther north in an area that includes a small part of northern New Hampshire. But it's possible she lived out west, such as in Minnesota. Investigators said the middle child likely spent most of her life away from the other 3 slain, but in the last few weeks or months before her death, all 4 victims were either all together or close to each other. Radioisotope testing shows that the middle girl, who is not directly related to the other 3, spent her childhood farther inland, possibly in Nebraska, Minnesota, or the Dakotas. I came across the information on a news site from an unnamed witness. To be honest, I haven't come across such information anywhere else, so I'm quite skeptical. The woman told police that she looked after Lisa and another 6-month-old girl while Gordon lived in Anaheim in 1984 and 1985. According to the woman, Gordon claimed to be a single father raising his children alone. Some speculate that Gordon killed the infant, as the following year, 1986, he appeared in a trailer park already with only one Lisa. The case is still pending. Authorities have promised to close the case only after identifying the dead girls and the woman. The remains of all 4 victims are still at the New Hampshire Chief Medical Examiner's office. Basically, this story is over for now. It's more accurate to say it's awaiting new discoveries. Somehow I want to believe that there will be someone who will recognize familiar features in these faces and call the police. I can't imagine that a whole family could disappear without a trace and no one would miss them. During my research of various facts related to the case, I came across the story of another girl who I believe fits Gordon's handwriting very well. In addition to the victims described above, several other crimes are unofficially attributed to Gordon. I partly agree with the researchers, as it is unlikely that the Barrel girls were his first victims. I will cite briefly just a few cases that, in one way or another, come up when describing Gordon's life. I will note that dates may not match the above biography, as no one can say exactly where and when Gordon was. Deborah Lee Horn. Deborah Lee Horn was 11 years old when she disappeared from her home in Allenstown in 1969. On the morning of January 29th, while rushing with her brother to catch the school bus, the girl slips, falls, and hits her head. Deborah returns home and complains to her mother of neck pain. The mom, Myrtle Lee Dow Horn, lets her stay home and runs off to work. A little later, around 11 a.m., Mom rushes home to check on her daughter. As she approaches the house, she notices tire tracks in the snow. Clearly someone was stuck and trying to get out. The mom walks into the house and doesn't find her daughter. Her coat and boots were left at home, the side door to the house was open, and the two poodles were home. Police's first theory is kidnapping. If she had left on her own, her father said, the dogs would have gone with her. The next day, police dogs found bloodstains about 2.5 kilometers from the girl's home. There was still no word on the missing person. Over the next weeks, hundreds of police officers and volunteers will search for Deborah on the ground and from the air, but the search will have to be suspended at the end of February due to the heavy snowfall. A $10,000 reward would be offered for bringing the girl home. 7 months later, namely on August 10, 1969, about 25 miles from Deborah's home, her body, unclothed and decomposed, was found in the trunk of an abandoned car. Her parents identified the remains as the gold ring and silver earrings she had been wearing the day she disappeared. A post-mortem examination revealed that the cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Joanne Dunham on June 11, 1968, at approximately 7:10 a.m., 15-year-old Joanne Dunham of Charleston disappeared on her way to school. Her body was found the next day on the dirt Quaker City Road about 9 kilometers from her home. The coroner determined that the girl had been sexually assaulted. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Kathy Lynn Glotty. On November 21, 1971, Kathy Lynn Glotty, 13, disappeared from downtown Franklin. The girl went to a nearby store and bought ice cream and potato sticks. A short time later, she was spotted on the campus of a local middle school. She was never seen after that. The next day, Katie's body was found in the woods near a popular swimming spot near Webster Street, about 5 kilometers from her home and 1.5 from where she was last seen. Katie was brutally raped, beaten at length, strangled and run over several times by a car. The cause of death was listed as neck, head, and abdominal injuries. In 2006, one Edward Duckett, a convicted sex offender, confessed to Katie's murder. But his story didn't fit the facts. Denise Danio. Although police say this case has nothing to do with Gordon, I feel it's worth mentioning because there are some interesting points here. Denise Dainault, 25, a mother of 2 boys, ages 4 and 6, lived at 343 Hayward Street, Manchester, New Hampshire. Ring any bells? She lived on the same street, literally 4 minutes by car, as Denise Bowden, Lisa's missing mother. On Saturday, June 8, 1980, Denise went to the clubhouse. She was last seen by 2 men at approximately 1:30 a.m. She was leaving the club, and in a brief conversation mentioned that she was on her way to a party. No one else saw her. Denise was divorced. Her ex-husband Paul Dainault's husband was a drug dealer. It is because of her drug-dealing ex-husband that police believe Denise's disappearance is unrelated to Gordon or the other missing girls. The main official version of Denise's disappearance is drugs, although relatives disagree. Laureen Ron, 14, lived 2 blocks away from Denise Danio with her mother Judith in an apartment building in Manchester, New Hampshire. The girl did well in school and loved to sing and dance. Her dream was to conquer Hollywood. April 26, 1980, Judith and Lauren were going to a tennis match to cheer for the participating boyfriend Judith. But Lauren changed her mind about going with her mom and asked to stay home. Judith didn't mind. As soon as her mom left, Lauren invited her girlfriend and friend to visit. They partied all day, drank beer, and when it came to nightfall, Lauren put the guests up for the night. For some reason, Lauren offered her friend to sleep in her room on her bed and went to sleep on the couch herself. At about 1:15 a.m., Judith and her boyfriend returned from the tournament. The first thing she noticed was the unlocked front door, which was very atypical for Lauren. She then discovers unscrewed light bulbs throughout the house. Judith, terrified that something is wrong, peeks into her daughter's room. She didn't go over, just saw that daughter was asleep in bed and, relieved, left. A little later, the boyfriend notices that the back door was open, even though she had locked it before leaving. Later, Lauren's other friend will tell the police that he escaped out the back door when he heard voices at the front door. Lauren had opened the front door and was talking to someone. The guy got scared that it was her mom and boyfriend coming back, so he ran out. It wasn't until closer to 4 a.m. that Judith discovered her daughter was gone, and her friend Lauren was asleep in her bed. The girl had disappeared, leaving her new sneakers, clothes, and purse in the living room. She was never seen again. Police believe the girl had run away to California. Rachel Garden. 15-year-old Rachel Garden lived in the small town of Newton, 50 kilometers from Allenstown. The girl was the eldest of 4 children and not distinguished by a malleable character, could drink with friends and rebel against parents. But nevertheless, she often helped her mother by looking after the younger children. She had a favorite horse, to which she was incredibly attached. Almost all her free time she spent with her. Rachel was new to her class, but nevertheless, she quickly became part of the team. She was a fun and sociable girl, and would join her new classmates when they went to the woods near Maple Avenue, where they drank beer and smoked cigarettes. On Saturday, March 22, 1980, at approximately 9 p.m., she leaves her parents and goes to a friend's house for a sleepover. On the way, she stops at Rose Corner Market Store and buys a pack of cigarettes and gum. Leaving the store, she makes her way down Maple Avenue to her friend's house, but she never shows up there. The only suspects in the case are the 3 guys the girl was seen talking to that night. But the police find no evidence to support their guilt. They were never officially suspects. Initially, the police suspected that the girl had run away. But after a while, the police put forward a version. Rachel herself left home, but planned to return. Something or someone interrupted her. Locals are linking Rachel's case to Lauren's. Shirley McBride. Shirley McBride. Shirley, nicknamed Tippy, lived in Manchester until 1981, 3.5 kilometers from Lauren Early's house. A couple years later, her family moved to Concord, New Hampshire. She was only 15 years old when she was already drinking, doing drugs, leaving home for days at a time, and generally living a pretty loose lifestyle. She lived with her parents and caused them a lot of frustration, even though they tried to fight her. The company with which their daughter was driven was not to her parents' liking. It is rumored that the girl regularly visited the local prison to meet with some of the convicts. As a result of constant scandals in the family, Shirley, because of her behavior, the girl goes to live with her half-sister Donna Whitcomb. One Friday night, July 13, 1984, Shirley leaves her sister's house to meet a boyfriend. He was just finishing up his shift at Concord Litho on Old Turnpike Road. The girl was never seen after that. It is still unknown if she made it to the meeting place or not. Police, as I understand it, do not consider her young man a suspect. Authorities believe that given Shirley's lifestyle, she may have met someone who could have killed her, and her boyfriend may have some information, but he has refused to cooperate with investigators. In the years after her disappearance, there were reports that Shirley had been seen in various towns in New Hampshire, but none of these facts were confirmed. In 1996, the parents recognized their daughter as deceased. Tammy Lynn Belanger. Tammy Lynn Belanger. In the early morning hours of November 13, 1984, 8-year-old Tammy left her home in the town of Exeter. The girl was on her way to Lincoln Street School by her usual route, but the girl did not show up at school. Teachers, checking the lists of students, noticed that Tammy was not there, but did not give it much importance, thinking that the girl stayed at home, as Tammy was periodically ill. Tammy's mother called the school without waiting for her daughter from school. There she was told that the girl did not show up at school today. Then, already not on a joke, alarmed mother turns to the police with a report on the disappearance of Tammy. The only suspect in Tammy's case was a pedophile named Victor Wonyatai. At the time, he was working as a technician at an auto plant located along the girl's route. During the search, a photograph of Tammy was found in his possession. Try as the police might, they had nothing on him other than circumstantial evidence. Shortly after these proceedings, Victor moves to Florida, hoping to make a fresh start. But he doesn't succeed. In 1992, he was arrested on charges of sex crimes against a minor. He is sentenced to 75 years in prison. While the trial was going on, many of his cellmates testified, claiming that Victor had confessed to them to raping and murdering not only Tammy, but also to killing a woman named Marjorie Luna, who had disappeared in Florida in 1984. Victor died in prison in 2012. Police were never able to prove Victor's involvement in Tammy's disappearance. Honestly, the list could go on ad infinitum. New Hampshire, sadly, has an awful lot of missing young women in the 80s and 90s. Many have not been found to this day. Were Gordon's victims among them? We may never know.